Hello everyone and welcome back to Flo's Corner. So in this video, I'm going to be discussing my personal experience as a phlebotomist working in a hospital setting and working in a clinic setting. So please stay tuned. Okay, so first we're going to start with the hospital setting first. When I worked in the hospital, I worked the C shift, which was considered the overnight shift. My shift started at 9 p.m. and ended at 7:30 a.m. the next morning. That was considered a full 10-hour shift because we only got a 30-minute break. Yeah, 10 hours working and 30-minute break is insane. But where I work, that's how it went. So there are actually three shifts. So working in the hospital, or I would say working in that particular hospital that I was working in, there was A shift, B shift, and C shift. A shift started at 3 a.m. B shift started at 11 a.m. and then C shift, which was my shift, started at 9 p.m. And they all pretty much were 10-hour shifts. I do remember some phlebotomists actually working 12-hour shifts, but that can be a pro and a con for certain people depending on you. I was in school and that's why that shift worked for me because I was doing school in the daytime and then I needed the overnight shift for to work because I had just had that life where I just couldn't go to school without working. I mean, everybody sadly is not fortunate enough, and I had to do what I had to do. So anywho, those were the three shifts. Another thing about working in the hospital is that you are the phlebotomist, so you have to go to the patient. We have a cart. This was this big like mobile cart that we took with us that I had to take all over the hospital because you are part of the lab and there is not a specific phlebotomist that goes onto one floor or anything like that. You are literally all over the hospital. You are anywhere that they need you, anyone that needs blood work on whichever floor. I'm telling you, you are the person. And obviously, I'm not the only phlebotomist or other phlebotomists, but we are all over the hospital. I feel that because I worked the C shift, sometimes that we were understaffed because there were, people who just obviously didn't want to come into work, or a lot of people that wouldn't work that overnight position. So there were many times that I would come in at 9 o'clock and they would tell me like, oh, Flo, we're a little bit, backed up, or they couldn't get certain draws before the B shift ended. So you're pretty much jumping on immediately, going to, those stats or going to these rooms to get these draws that weren't completed in the B shift. So yeah, most of the time there is no downtime. As soon as you literally clock in, you are boom on it. You get your phone, you get what patients need to be done. You do see some of them that were Hardsticks, so that means that you have to go back into their room or needs another second phlebotomist and stuff. So yeah, I would turn on my phone and I am just on the go. I am literally on the go. You see that there's some draws and stuff that's red for stats and things. So you are just honestly just boom, bam, boom. You are just grab your cart, make sure your cart is filled up with all the utensils and everything that you need, and go, honestly. So when I was working in the hospital, there was a lot of walking. I mean, yeah, after my 10-hour shift, I'm telling you, my feet, my ankles, my toes, you name it, everything was on fire because you are just walking. Like, there is really not that much downtime because there are so many draws that you have to do. And a lot of people think that, oh, because it's overnight, oh, it's not as busy. It's not as busy. And I understand the daytime could be more traffic sometimes because, there's more doctors and stuff like that in the hospital. But the nighttime, too, there are a lot of patients that need draws. There are a lot of things that didn't get done during the daytime. So now it's had moved further into the nighttime. And yeah, working overnight, there was no downtime, like at all. And do not forget, like I said, you are pushing that cart. That cart was literally, I would say, it was kind of almost like here up to me. I'll insert more video so you guys can see what I'm talking about. So I would kind of like when my feet was really hurting, I would kind of like lean on it and just kind of, roll to wherever else I needed to be, what other floor or another patient's room that I need to be in. But you are rolling that car all over the hospital with you. It's not like you just taking you and yourself and just walking around the hospital. You are rolling this cart that is super heavy, and you're pushing it, and because it has all the supplies and things that you need. So yeah, that was the main thing with working in the hospital that I noticed that was a lot for me, is because like my feet, like at the end of my shift, was really in a lot of pain. Some days it was really hard, and you went back the next day, or you went back 2 days later, and you felt like you really didn't get enough rest to recover, so you were like out of commission. But let's get into more of the nitty gritty about the hospital. Is that it's a hospital. So obviously we are all aware that most of the time when people are in the hospital, you're dealing with sick patients, you're dealing with a lot of emergency situations. So as a phlebotomist, you do come across a lot of Hardsticks, a lot. And it's more so like, people coming into the hospital because they're very dehydrated. There are a lot of people I met that I couldn't find veins. There's just none there. There's just, it became a lot, because sometimes I would think that, you would go in a room and you would think maybe 10 minutes the most that you'll be in with someone. But sometimes you're in there for good, I would say 25, maybe even 30 minutes of trying to find a vein, or finding a vein and it blew or anything like that, because there's just so much that is going on in a hospital versus a clinic setting, so that for me was definitely a lot, especially when I had so many draws. And I did have some that were stats. So stats in the hospital world meant like these need to be drawn right now and be sent to the lab, because this is what the test, these are the blood draws that the doctor has ordered for the patient, so they can find out something quickly, normally like for surgery, or just anything else of the patient's care and things. So some of the times you really need to get this draw for whatever, because if you don't have the blood draw, then they can't move on to whatever else of the patient's care that they're going to do. So yeah, you're in there, you're in that room, and you're trying everything with the tourniquet. Also ambulating the patient is a little bit hard, because it's like you can't turn them. There's some of them are in certain positions for a reason and things like that. So you really honestly had to just work with what you can get. Another thing about the hospital, I would say, was the rapid responses and the cold blues. Now, these were tough, because you already, like I said, when you come in, you have so many draws, you do have stats. And the funny thing about stats is that sometimes they start popping up. So you may not have had any stats, and then all of a sudden one stat came. So once you finish that stat, now you got 3 more stats, and they just kept popping up. So yeah, it's a lot. It definitely is a lot. And then when a code blue happens or a rapid response happens, everyone is running to wherever that emergency is, and you as well as a phlebotomist. Sometimes, like I said, when we were understaffed and things, and you're like maybe 1 or 2 phlebotomists are all over the hospital, whenever you get cold blues and rapid responses, they would always alert us on our phones from the lab saying that, hey Flo, can you go get that code blue? Can you go get that rapid response? Because sometimes they need a phlebotomist as well in the room to draw the patient's blood and things. So not only are you having all your stats and all your other blood draws, you are also needing to run when those things happen. So I'm telling you, that's what I'm saying. My feet was on fire, because even when you hear it, like you just finished drawing your patient and then you hear code blue and your phone is like, doo, doo, the next second. And I'm like, oh my God. And now I have to like, hurry up, bag everything, la da da. And then you're just like running to where the emergency is. And that can be time consuming as well. Then you're trying to figure out what's going on. Sometimes they don't always need a phlebotomist, but as a phlebotomist, you're still supposed to go there, because sometimes they do need blood draws. But you're trying to get into the room. You don't know what's going on. Everybody's just kind of frantic and stuff. So it's kind of hard to get information sometimes. So you do notice yourself kind of standing outside of the room with your cart. Like, do you guys need lab work or anything? it can be kind of brutal, which kind of takes you from all the other stuff that you have to do, because these other draws sometimes do, even though they may not be stat, they do have time limits. So when you're stuck waiting outside of a room, your time limits on the other blood draws is just going, so it becomes a lot. As a phlebotomist, you don't always encounter very nice and friendly people, because I understand that being in a hospital is not feasible for a lot of people. I understand. I mean, you don't want to be sick and things. So sometimes as a phlebotomist, what I did encounter was a lot of not really very nice people, just for the simple fact of, I know that being in a hospital is a lot, and I'm not sure what their care is for I mean, what their patient care was while how long it's been and things. So normally when the phlebotomist would come in, we would kind of get the root of it. We would get first asked a lot of questions, and why am I getting my blood drawn again? Because some of them had to be drawn, like every 2 hours, maybe every 3 hours, depending on what their nurse ordered or what their doctor ordered. And, you see my face, and then they're like, oh gosh, I'm getting stuck again. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm just pretty much here to do my job. So you did encounter that a lot in the hospital. A lot of people were not too friendly, which was, could be a little downer here and there depending on your mood and how you felt, but not everyone is like that, just certain ones. But I'm gonna start with saying some positive things. I don't want you guys to feel like this video was just to bash a lot of the hospital and things. I'm just telling you my personal experience. Pros that I do have of working in the hospital is that the pay was very good. You do get a lot of exposure, depending, like, especially if you're just putting yourself into the medical field and you don't know what you want to do. Being a phlebotomist definitely puts you in so many different positions. You can be around so many different people with different titles, even just like the specialties, things around the hospital, different floors, all kinds of things. Like, that's what I mean by the exposure part. Like, so if you're just like, you're a phlebotomist, but then you went to the pediatrics floor, maybe you found a love for children, or like things like that. Like, what I mean is about how much exposure you can get, definitely more in a hospital. The work environment is very different because you do not always have the same draw, so you do get to learn more tubes, more different tests that are being drawn. You do see a whole different diverse environment, because obviously it's all tons of people in the hospital. So I do feel that the diversity was amazing. You got to deal with neonatals, which was babies, newborns. I did deal with pediatrics. I dealt with adolescents, teenagers, adults, middle age, geriatrics. Like, you literally just deal with every single person. And that to me was awesome, because I love to meet new people and figure out things about them. So that was always great. And also, it was a good experience for my start in phlebotomy. Honestly, I feel that because I worked in a hospital first, when I started to work in a clinic, it actually already kind of prepared me for that. Like, I really knew how everything was in the phlebotomy world, and that just made it even easier to transition from a hospital into a clinic and just enjoy myself in my phlebotomy journey. I do love that I got to start out in the hospital environment as my beginning stage of my phlebotomy journey. There is so much more that I can go in detail about a lot of other things working in the hospital, but that would be like a whole nother video that I would have to make, because there's just too much to put all in one video. But now I am going to move on to my phlebotomy journey in the clinic world. So me working as a phlebotomist in a clinic, so now I work for a laboratory company, which is a third party for the clinic that I work at. And normally, if you notice that you or your children or anyone you know that goes to a clinic, sometimes they have a different room or location for their lab work, which is kind of like a little side part of the clinic that you are at, which is normally like a laboratory. You know, we know everything of like LabCorp, Quest, things like that. And they actually have little laboratories. They have their own little spots like all around your city and things like that, where your doctor can refer you to go to that specific place to give blood draw, urine, or anything like that. So I work for a third party as well, but I work in a clinical setting. If you haven't checked out my day in the life as a phlebotomist video, please go check that out. I will make sure to leave it in the description box below so you can kind of get a feel of what I do at my specific clinic as a phlebotomist. Now, one of the differences when working in a clinical setting versus a hospital setting is that there are not many emergencies. You are literally dealing with patients who are coming in, you know, just for like their care, like just regular patient care. Some of them are there for annuals, some of them are there for, you know, just certain minor things, nothing really too extreme. So what I mean by that is that the patients that I normally get in a clinical setting, I really could barely say I don't have as many Hardsticks as I would have had if I was in the hospital, because, you know, the patients tend to be just a little bit different health wise coming into the clinic that I notice from working in the hospital. So it's very kind of more on a subtle, quieter kind of environment versus the hospital. One definitely big pro is that the patients actually come to me. So in the hospital, you guys know I said that I'm all over the hospital and I'm just like going to patients' room, different floors, different units. And me working in the clinical settings is that there is a room that I have that the patients actually come to me, which makes it awesome because my feet says thank you. Because of the certain clinic that I am in, I noticed that most of my drawers tend to be repetitive, which is fine because it's a certain type of doctor or certain kind of doctor that I work for. So there are certain patients from that dynamic that goes to see that certain doctor. So that means that a lot of the lab work for a lot of the different patients is kind of the same versus the hospital. Like I said, you get to do way more different labs, different draws, different tests and things like that. And in the clinical setting, because of the specialty of the doctor that I work for, the draws are pretty much repetitive, which is great in my eyes. For someone else that wants a lot of changes and different things going on, maybe a clinical setting may not be for you, but it just depends on where you are. Another thing about working in the clinical setting is that the environment tends to be a little bit more quieter, more subtle, more coming into work knowing what you're going to do for the day and things like that. It's not really like the hospital where kind of like when you just clock in, a lot of things were very just thrown at you and you just knew you were going to be all over. You just really come in and, you know, you have your desk and everything that you need and stuff like that. Like I said, the patient comes to you. You're really not all over the clinic. Depending on the clinic, I don't want to say this, and you know, you may work in a clinic where you are going into different patients' room, but I'm just going off, like I said, my personal experience. And then in my clinic, I actually have my own room for my blood draws and things like that. So I'm just wanted to clarify that up a bit. A difference between the hospital and the clinic for me is that you control your environment. In the hospital, the controlling of your environment is a little bit out of your hands because, you know, you are just, you know, whatever is happening, boom, 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 boom. You're just going. You're doing this change. Now they want this, now they want that. So you don't really have that much control over the environment when working in the hospital. But in the clinical setting, I noticed that I get to control my environment just a little bit more. I know what to do. Even, you know, even if something is a little stressful, you still have a little bit more hold on to the situation versus the hospital wise. And I feel like that makes a big difference. So I'm going to end it here. I'm going to say that I still get paid the same that I was making when I was working at the hospital, but I think that's also because of my experience of how long I've been a phlebotomist. I'm not really sure if it really does make a difference whether you work in a hospital or whether you work in the clinic. I did hear here and there sometimes that when other phlebotomists worked like at certain laboratories and things, the pay was just a little bit lower than it was in the hospital. So my personal experience, like I said, I do get paid the same. The work-life balance when working in a clinic is much better because you are only there for how long the clinic needs you or whenever the clinic is open. When you're working in the hospital, that is 24/7. So that's why you can just work all crazy odd hours all throughout the times of the hospital from Sunday to next Sunday. And yeah, the hours in the clinic is more feasible when you want a little bit more stability instead of just kind of being all thrown around and things. So I do feel that that is a plus for the clinic. And also, like I said, you can get holidays off and stuff like that because if the clinic is closed, then guess what? You don't work either. So that's great. But so far, that is pretty much just a little bit of the gist of it. There is way more things that I can talk about. If you guys are interested, please like this video or comment in the comment section down below because I'm thinking of doing a Q&A if you have any more questions like about phlebotomy in the hospital setting, in the clinical setting. If you have any phlebotomy questions in general about certification, pay, anything like that, put your questions down below, or you can follow me on my Instagram and you can always DM me your questions and I'll try to get it together to do a Q&A for anyone that's interested. But I thank you all for tuning in. This video was so fun to make. I hope I answered some questions. If you are new to phlebotomy, welcome, honey. This is the life, okay? You're gonna love it. You're gonna do great. And I thank you all for tuning in, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.